After an awful lot of work on this AC30, you can see I've got very secure connections now. By using some really heavy-duty fender washers, I was able to move the aluminum in these areas and get it to be flat. And with a combination of stainless steel hardware, let's see, on this side we've got number 8 by 32, or 8 by 24, I think 32, stainless steel screw, then a compression washer, then a heavy-duty washer on the other side, an even thicker washer, and then a Kester nut. And that makes it rock solid, and I've got that in place for every transformer mounting point here. And the grounds are done the same way. I'll show that in just a little bit. I do have a question for the owner. Someone in the past has spray painted or somehow painted the entire chassis in this metallic gold or copper, but they painted on top of the tube sockets. Every tube socket here on this plane, so that's all the output tubes and the rectifier tube, there's this metallic copper or gold paint on top of, and it goes down into the socket. Now, they all seem to be working okay, but it's possible that there's a little flecks of that paint in the socket which could cause a problem down the line. And I only bring this up to ask the owner once he sees this video. I can change out these sockets while it's here and eliminate this problem and eliminate that possibility. If this were anything but a 1964 AC30, or 59 Fender, etc., I would replace these on site, because once you get gold paint or copper paint, any kind of paint or metallic paint especially, down into a tube socket, you're just kind of spinning the wheel and hoping nothing bad happens. And I cannot guarantee that nothing bad will happen at some point as a result of this. That said, so far, it does not seem to have happened. So it's your choice, but I would be glad to change out these sockets while it's here. It's not terribly expensive. Another thing that the owner needs to know is that while these mullards work, and I've been able to get the hum way, way down, as you'll hear in just a moment, certain combinations of these mullards work and other combinations don't. You need to have pretty much the same current draw from this pair as from this pair. So when you get the amp back, I will have little bits of tape on the top of each tube saying 1, 2, 3, 4, my suggested layout. Once you do that, you want to remove the tape because the residue could get yucky when it gets hot, but it's just a trick. These are not really a matched quad, but two roughly matched pairs can be made from this quad. Here you can see I also replaced the screw, one of the two screws which holds the filter can cap in place, because the screw, the original brass screw, was halfway broken. The head was halfway sheared off, and it was not fully tight and could not be tightened as a result. So I have a new stainless steel screw here. I've got a nylock nut in this case to hold these ground points to the chassis. You can see I cleaned that area of the chassis as well. All the original parts which are not being used, which so far are pretty much just screws and nuts, which were not up to the task, that's why it failed before, are being returned with the amp in a Ziploc bag if you ever sell it to a collector who wants to have all the original bits and bobs, but this higher quality stuff is much better. Here you can see the other side of the new hardware with that fairly large fender washer, and then the ground lug, and then a heavy-duty Kester nut, and all that is really cranked tight, which forced this part of the aluminum chassis to straighten up. I also straightened up the bent flanges, the little mounting points on the back of the output and power transformer, so it's all on a level plane again. So the problem that this amp had should not return. There was a generic electrolytic cap here, 22 microfarad, 25 volt, that I did not install in the amp. I don't know whether it predates the first time I had this amp in 2012, or whether it was changed after I last had the amp, but it was pretty generic. I could not get a brand on it. I put in a Vichy while I was in the neighborhood because I wanted to know that this cap, which is the bypass cap on the first half of the top boost tube, was good. Down here there was a cloth-covered wire going to the volume pot on the Brilliant channel, the top boost channel. I've replaced that with this 20 gauge wire, which is more similar to what would have been in here originally. I had put in a shielded run from here to the grid of the top boost tube, and it was a Mogami cable, and in the last 12 years I've stopped using them because they can break, because the interconductor is just a little too narrow. And shielding is not really necessary for this run. So again, some 20 gauge Teflon coated wire is being run here, and it goes underneath the board to pin 7 of this tube. That silver mica, the generic silver mica, has been replaced with this Vichy 1000 volt ceramic, which is more authentic to the amp. And this little dog leg cap that was mounted as a bright cap here on the Brilliant channel had drifted badly and was noisy and was painfully bright. So I'm going to get, I don't have one in stock, but I'm going to order a Vichy 100 picofarad to go right there to put this back to the original spec. And these caps, these Vichy caps, sound an awful lot like the originals used by JMI. But, you know, chasing down old dog legs, you'd have to buy 10 to find one that still works, and there's no guarantee how long it would work. Let's not go down that road unless you really want it. But if you really want all this, you know, authentic, an awful lot of this needs to be redone. And that's a big expense. And as far as reliability and sound goes, you're already at a really good place. It's just not as, you know, it's a player grade amp. All right, it's warmed up and has a certain level of hum still. I can do a few things that'll get that even lower. I have not changed out the screen grid resistors yet, as I mentioned in the previous video. I want to make sure the owner doesn't want me to change the tube sockets first, because there's no reason for me to do that work twice. But the amp is sounding immensely better than it was. Now, no matter what I do, it doesn't get those glitchy sounds and it doesn't cut out. So that's nice. Here's a friend's Telecaster on the neck and the Bribe trim channel. I like the sound of the Bribe trim on these things. This guitar is in to get some new saddles and new pots, and we're going to redo the wiring on this telly. And I think this will be the guitar I use to do a soldering tips and tricks video as requested by people. I think more people can relate to wiring a volume pot in a Telecaster, or wiring an output jack, or repairing a cable than they can to fixing a 1964 AC30. Now, as mentioned, the bright cap that was on the Brilliant channel was way out of spec. It was painfully bright. It's still on the bright side, and I'm not entirely sure that everything in the top boost circuit is as I want it to be. I will be playing around with this a bit more. It's still on the very bright side, but it sounds nice. The JMI circuit is wired differently than you find in the hand-wired or the TBX. The hand-wired in the TBX gets brighter as you turn it clockwise and bassier as you turn it clockwise. The JMI gets darker as you turn the treble clockwise and thinner as you turn the bass clockwise. So it works exactly backwards. I have to admit I prefer the modern wiring. Not because clockwise is any way better than counterclockwise, but because they use audio taper pots. You have a very narrow window of good control with the JMI circuit compared to what I consider modern JMI wiring. I'm not going to change it unless the owner wants it, but it does make it a little bit trickier to dial in. So as you can hear, it's still possible to get really nice sounds from it. Just a little bit narrower margin of control, and a lot of the bass change happens right in here. And then the rest of it, you can't really hear it in this demo. I'll show it when it's all done. This really does affect the mid-range interaction up in this range more than anything else. But I need to go in there and make sure that the 10K is still good. The 100K slope resistor measured fine, but that does not mean that it's operating the same under current as it measures, just in terms of just resistance when the circuit is cold. So I've got to do all that to make sure this is really up to my standards. And my standards are particularly good sounding JMIs I've had in. One other thing I want to mention to the owner, I'm not trying to do this as an upsell. I'm not trying to get any other money from you. But I recapped this amp, the F&T filter caps and the Sprague bypass caps 11 and a half years ago, essentially. And typically, I recommend every 15, 20 years for amps to be recapped. I would be glad to recap, replace the F&Ts with some new ones and buy another 15, 20 years. They are fine now, but sometime in the next 5 to 7 years, it's possible that they will need to be changed. And then you'd have to take it to a tech or back to me if I'm, still in your good graces to have it done. I'd be glad to do it now while it's here. Just get it all out of the way. You won't have to think about it again for a long time, but it's totally up to you. I'm fine sending it back with the filter caps it already has in it. They were installed properly. I don't have any problem with how that aspect of the amp is behaving. Once I hear back from you about those output tube sockets and the rectifier tube socket, with the paint, then I'll know how far we are away from completion. Thanks for watching.